very quiet.
It is very quiet. Why is that? Hmm.
I could hum it. I could play it on air guitar. There we go.
Hey folks, this is Jeff Hammer from Nascar on Fox, and you are listening to On Pit Row.
I don't know.
I don't know. We'll go with that, whatever it is.
We'll get the tech right on this one of these days. Hi, everybody. I'm Charlie Turner. I'm one of the hosts of our weekly NASCAR Live Hangout on Pit Row. I'm joined by my cohorts in NASCAR crime, Dan Beaver out in Texas. Hey, Dan, how are you?
I'm doing great.
And Steve Ronkowitz in sunny Sylvania, Ohio, the city of trees.
Not so sunny at the moment, but give it 3 seconds and it'll change the way it's been the last 2 days. So.
And pretty soon, probably before the end of the show, Beth Ann will big time us and join us as well. So I think from Bowling Green, but who knows where she is. So anyway,
and don't feel bad, Steve. You tried to make it sunny down here in Texas too, and it's not sunny down here.
I'm just trying to be a positive person, guys. That's all. It's always sunny in Toledo.
Always. It's always beautiful.
The attitudes are always good here. So anyway, enough of that. We had road racing this past weekend. First of all, road racing on Saturday at Road America for the Nationwide guys, and then on Sunday the big race out in the wine country, Sonoma, California, the Toyota Save Mark 350 for the Sprint Cup dudes. Fun racing to watch. Anybody who wants to go first on this thing? I didn't get a chance to see very much of it, so I'll just watch.
Well, other than the fact that, again, it looks like Road America was a lot better and more fun race than the race out in Sonoma, why in the heck aren't they going to Road America on the Cup side? That's the big question. Is everything that they have done at Road America in the Nationwide Series has been terrific. When they ran at Montreal in the Nationwide Series, it was terrific. Racing at Sonoma, not too bad. But those other two tracks, I think, were better, more entertaining.
And the short answer is neither Bruton Smith nor NASCAR own Road America. So
yeah,
there you go. There's the answer.
Should I say it again? My favorite. It's not the money. It's the amount. It's the amount they get to keep is what it comes down to. So.
But you're right, but you're right about that race at Road America. The last time we raced in the rain, I think, was back in Montreal, and it was just like clown cars. This time, they did a good job. It took a while to figure out whether or not it was rainy enough to use the apparently occasional rain tires, but once they finally strapped those suckers on, it took them a lap or two. They had to tiptoe. You had Tagliani then who just ran away from everybody because of his set of skills versus the other guys. But the rank and file NASCAR drivers, they adjusted a lot quicker than I thought they would, and put on a good show behind Tagliani.
Hey, Dan, don't you think, though, these guys who have been billed as the greatest race car drivers in the world for years finally are starting to live up to that? If they can finally strap themselves into this car and run in the rain, and they can run pretty good on a road course, I think they're finally starting to live up to the moniker.
Yeah, I think so too. And part of the challenge has always been you've got 43 drivers out there. We say that they're the 43 best drivers in the world. They're not. They're 20 of the best drivers and 23 very good drivers. And it's those 23 that keep going off course and bringing out the cautions that kind of skew the effect. But this was good kind of all the way through the field. So yeah, I think so. And it's another rationale for why there should be a road course race in the chase. It needs to be the right course. It needs to be someplace where they're not just beating and banging on each other. But I think there needs to be a road course race in the chase so that you can prove that NASCAR drivers are the best drivers.
Austin, Texas. I'm starting to chirp. Austin, Texas. We need to go to COTA. That's the place for the chase race.
Well, hey, and the timing would be about right. Dan, you can speak to this probably better than anybody else would. If you're going to put a road course in the chase, and you're talking October, early November, probably pretty good place to be in Austin that time of year.
It is. And it's one reason the Formula One race is late in the fall here. It's nice and cool, but it's not rainy. So Yeah. Anytime from September on, you might run into some scheduling issues. I don't know that COTA would want to major events like that so close to one another, but I suspect if NASCAR gave them a race, they'd have a hard time turning it down.
They might figure out a way to make that work, I think.
Yeah.
That'd be a great race to go into Homestead with. You had that as race number 35. That would be a nice, interesting turn of events as you headed to Homestead.
Yeah, and you would have weeded out any of the drivers that were there by, let's say, Marcus Ambrose wins at Watkins Glen and makes it in. There's no way he probably would make it to that final one, but if he did, then you would have weeded out some of the occasional or the drivers who really didn't belong in the chase with the 16-man format by the time you got there.
Well, it's really interesting, and we'll have to watch that as we go forward, but we can't take the whole half hour talking about what we'd like to see in the chase as a road course. We need to talk about these two races this past. Well, I guess we can, but stop. We're going to talk about the race from last weekend. Let's talk a little bit about the Sprint Cup race, and we can come back to this. So, Carl Edwards was this his going away? Carl Edwards wins at Sonoma. Is this his going away present to Jack Roush, and did it make Jack Roush smile?
I didn't see Jack Roush smile when
I didn't either.
When Carl Edwards went up to him in victory lane to give him the obligatory hug. I didn't see. Maybe it's just the fact that Jack can't smile anymore after 15 plane crashes. I don't know. That was snarky, but maybe that's what it is. But it sure as heck looks like he's gone. I mean, even the more people say he's not, it makes you feel like the more he will be.
Well, that's your saying, right? The more denials, the more obvious it is that it's true.
Exactly. It's been that way forever, and I don't see it changing. And I mean, it's gone so far as there being discussion about the fact that he's going to take over the M&M sponsorship, and Kyle Busch is bringing Monster Energy to his Cup ride. So, I mean, it all makes sense if you look at it that way. The only part that doesn't make sense is whether or not Carl Edwards eating Subway sandwiches to stay fit will work in with eating Snickers bars to offset it.
I don't know. A Snickers bar as a meal in itself will get you through the day. I've had a Snickers bar for lunch before, and that works. I think it's also interesting that on the heels of his victory last week, we get the announcement this week that Home Depot is going away. So now the sponsorship seems less certain at Joe Gibbs overall than it did. But I guess those are two separate issues. They probably one won't cloud the other.
Is that more a product of the corporate climate, or more of a product of the corporate climate not liking NASCAR as much, not being enthralled with NASCAR?
I haven't seen enough to comment, so I don't really know. But they have been kind of backing off the last couple of years. They gave up some of their real estate to Dollar General 3 years ago, a lot more of the real estate last year and this year. So we're getting to that point where I think they just used up whatever capital they could to get the NASCAR fan and are willing to let it go. Probably also doesn't help that they've been getting their butts kicked by Lowe's in the last few years. So if you're going to go head-to-head with another major competitor like that, you want to be able to go toe-to-toe with them.
Well, not just Lowe's, even Menards. Paul Menard is starting to trump the Home Depot car. So I think it's a matter of they lost the home improvement wars in NASCAR, and they're getting out while they still can.
And probably they may have gotten in because of Tony Stewart, because there was such a great character that could represent them. Yep. Logano wasn't nearly that same character, and certainly didn't fit the home improvement demographic. I can't see that kid working on his house. No. And Kenseth is so quiet that that could have factored into it. Just guessing.
But if that's true, though, doesn't Home Depot have to sign off on who their spokesperson is going to be in the series? And you would have to think that when Logano was given that ride, they signed off on the fact that, hey, yeah, we think Joey Logano is a guy for us. And then conversely, when Matt Kenseth took over, same thing. Didn't you think they would have had to have been on board with that?
I don't suspect they did, but there were also, what were the other alternatives? You weren't going to get a Harvick at that point. You weren't going to get a Clint Bowyer or someone, maybe you could have gotten Bowyer, but you weren't necessarily going to get the driver that perfectly fit their image. And they lost a driver who almost perfectly fit their image. I'm not sure that Tony Stewart's working on his house either, but you certainly see him in that role more than you do some of the other guys.
You could see Tony with some plumber's butt pants on, I think, not so much Joey LeBlanc. Just a thought.
Thank you for that thought.
I'm sorry, I'm going to have to go throw up now.
Never mind.
I think I'm feeling queasy now.
Other news this week that's not related at all to what we just talked about. So let's go right to that. It makes all kinds of sense in the world. Richard Childress is entertaining going to Australia, presumably buying in to an Australian supercar team on the heels of Roger Penske doing, sounds like the same thing. You're going to turn Australian supercars into a NASCAR franchise someday, or are they just going over there to because they can't get enough racing over here?
There's got to be money to be made over there. Would be
supposedly the money deal for Childress is selling V8 engines over there.
Well, that could be. Obviously, Penske's not selling engines over there, but I guess if that's what is luring Childress over there, that's fine. I don't know. I guess enough about it to know what the money part of it ends up being, but I guess it's kind of an interesting theory. The other thing you could be looking at is maybe they're looking to find drivers. There's this great untapped source of very good hitting baseball players in Cuba that everybody just found. Maybe there's more Marcos Ambroses in Australia than anybody else is able to find.
Well, I hope the Australian driver pool is better than the Australian pitcher pool is in baseball, because it hasn't been very good for our Detroit Tigers. And the couple times they've dipped their foot into the southern hemisphere waters. The one thing that has been talked about is their Australian V8 Supercars is looking for a second date over here. They'd like to have two of their events run in North America. So along with the one at Circuit of the Americas, I think they'll be looking for another road course race. I wonder where that would be. I wonder what they would do there, and then how that expands this potential relationship between NASCAR teams and V8 Supercars.
Yeah, and I think. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, I'd like to see what the economics are as far as V8 supercar teams coming over here and racing in Texas, whether or not it made monetary sense for them to do. The big deal always with IndyCar, with Formula One, is the cost of shipping all that stuff from continent to continent. More so, I guess, with what IndyCar used to do than Formula One, because Formula One is just ridiculous anyhow. But the logistics and the cost, does it make sense monetarily? I spend weekends in this country talking about racing and doing races and wondering how people make any of this make any sense whatsoever for themselves, and I can't see how V8 supercars made money coming here.
Well, they may not have, but they may have a better chance of making some money if they have two events on the trip.
Yeah, and they travel other places as well. They'll travel to
they go up into
Dhabi
Malaysia.
Yeah, they've been in Indonesia. So some of the cost, once you incur the cost to get the cars packed up and in a container, it's incremental to go further. There are enough good venues over here for them to race. Road America, we already talked about. I think it'd be a good venue. They could try to do some sort of companion or a week ahead of the Canadian race. So I think there are some opportunities, and if they got over here, they really could run more than twice, you would think. United States is a big country. Get them north, south, east, west, you're going to get a different group of fans coming out.
So far, they haven't partnered up with NASCAR. At least they haven't at the one race they have down in Texas. I'm wondering if, with these two major teams from NASCAR dabbling in that series, if that kind of portends that we'll have a V8 Supercar weekend combined with maybe Nationwide or something, that would really be interesting, I think.
Yeah, it could be. I think the more likely scenario is that driver pool that one of you guys was talking about a little bit earlier. They do sprint car. There's a lot of sprint car racing going on down in Australia, so you've got two feeders that have become attractive in NASCAR here in the U.S. If sprint car racing, I don't know that it feeds into V8 supercars all that much, but you've at least got some diversity of racing down there that you don't see in Europe.
And Beth Ann has joined us. Can you hear us, Beth?
Yeah, pretty well.
Yeah, we can hear you too. All right, everything's good. So we talked a little bit about Sonoma. We talked about Richard Childress going over to Australia along with Roger Penske and buying into V8 supercars. How would you feel about an influx of Australian and Tasmanian drivers into NASCAR, Beth?
How would I feel?
Yeah.
I think I'd be okay with that, actually. I think it would add interest. Why not?
Yeah, diversity, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So Steve, we probably should do this read. I put up on our rookies didn't do all that well at Sonoma, at least in the Sprint Cup. Rookies didn't do all that well. I think Austin Jackson was the top finishing rookie in 17th place. Our fast lap question today.
Austin Jackson, when he wasn't playing center field for the Tigers.
Did I say Austin Jackson?
I was wondering about that.
Okay, Austin Dillon. Sorry, I'm not a one-trick pony. What can I say? And every once in a while, the saddles get mixed up. Austin Dillon finished 17th at Sonoma. Thank you for that. And I put up on our Facebook page, on Pit Row on Facebook, the Fast Lap question this week. Who's your favorite NASCAR rookie this year, 2014? And we've had some decent responses. We're going to give away a Shell gift card, which Steve will explain to you here in a minute. But we're also there's a little bonus prize this week to the comment we picked. We have a big announcement coming up. There's a new piece of content coming out from our On Pit Row and Dan Beaver partnership. We're putting on an actual digital magazine called On Pit Row Magazine, soon to be live, probably within the next couple of days, as soon as Apple gives their stamp of approval. And now that Steve finally bought an Apple product, we'll probably get it approved. So
yeah, that put it over the top for sure.
So whoever wins this week is not only going to get a $50 Shell gift card from Shell, but they're going to get a free subscription for the initial season of On Pit Row Magazine. So how about that? That's priceless.
That's pretty sweet. And you can submit the Shell Saver Card comment of the day and take home a $50 Shell gift card and the free subscription. Just remember, anytime the Joey Logano driver, the 22 Shell Pennzoil Ford Fusion, wins a 2014 points race, Shell Saver Card holders save 22 cents per gallon on any grade of Shell nitrogen-rich gasoline or Shell diesel just by using their Shell Saver Card on the Wednesday after the race. Offer valid up to 25 gallons. Visit shell.us/Wednesday for the details.
Okay, so we're all done here with the road courses for a little while. Go back to, as Dan calls them, similarly, I can never say this.
Similarly configured mile-and-a-half tracks.
Thank you, sir. And we're going to Kentucky. And from the stats I looked at a little bit this morning when I was kind of doing a little prep for the show, Kyle Busch is the best average finish, I think, there since we started racing down there. But that probably includes the nationwide series races that he seems to sweep down there in truck races and everything else. Going back to a mile-and-a-half track, Dan, what are we looking for this week? What do you think? Is this about the end for Matt Kenseth? Does he have to win this week?
No. Well, he still has 10 more chances. This is the beginning of the race to the what were they calling it? The race to the chase for the Cup.
Right. Yeah, the race to the chase.
And you really can't count him out until you get right up to the end of that. This is probably one of his better options. He won it last year. He's one of 4 drivers who've swept the top 10 at Kentucky in their first 3 races. So he's right there with Kyle Busch and Jimmy Johnson, Jeff Gordon as drivers who've shown success here. The bigger problem is that he hasn't shown as much success on the other similar configured mile-and-a-half tracks up until now. He's not bringing any momentum with him whatsoever. So getting a top 10 is certainly possible. Finishing between 6th and 10th is much more likely than finishing in the top 5, I think.
The other team that seems to be having issues that you would expect to not have issues, we talked about a little bit earlier when we talked about Kevin Harvick of Stewart-Haas Racing. Tony Stewart has shown, glimmers of hope, I guess, if you're a Stewart fan, the last 4 weeks or so. I would think this would be a good track for Stewart. Do you expect to see him do well or not?
I don't know that I do. He hasn't gotten a top 10 here yet. 12th in the first race was the closest he got. He was 20th last year. He hasn't been burning up the track, or he hasn't been getting the finishes on the other cookie cutter tracks this year as he did last year. So, at least from a fantasy pick, he would be hard to take over some of the other drivers. And until whatever problems they have at Stewart-Haas Racing seems to be endemic to the entire organization. Seems to be happening in the pits or the crew for the most part. The drivers then try to make it up. I think that might be why Tony Stewart was caught speeding last week. But it all seems to be there. The on-track performance is not a problem, with the exception of a few cut tires here and there. You got to wonder, you got to start asking the question that what impact was that fourth team? Said it wasn't going to be a problem. It's being funded out of one of the owner's pockets. Should have enough cash, but is there enough talent to go around, spread across these 4 teams, and is trying to spread that talent too thin part of what has created their problems?
Yeah, see, it's funny that you bring that up. I'm not surprised that you bring it up because you're smart. But when I saw the articles about Childress and Penske going over to Australia and starting to dabble in the V8 Supercard series, I didn't think so much of driver talent coming over here. I thought about garage and crew talent coming over, because there seems to be a shortage of really good. We don't have 43 really good pit crews. And it doesn't take, if you can find 4 or 5 more A-level crew members to fit into a 4-car team, you could make a difference.
Yeah, with 43 crews, you're looking at, 350, 375 members,
Yeah.
Conservatively.
Right.
And to get not to say anything bad about any of them, certainly I couldn't do. I couldn't change the tires on those cars if they gave me 15 minutes and an icy to go with it. But or can they get 350 people that are comparably good to one another?
And how many of those have gone on to some other, form of employment over the last 5 years?
Right.
Those that were with teams that were talented, and all of a sudden those jobs were vacated and no longer in the sport. So, there's some of that has come through attrition as well.
I also suspect that at that level, for those crew members, you get more sports-related injury burnouts than you do for the drivers. And if those guys blow their knees, something happens, they're no longer in that same talent pool, where the driver can make up for it with other parts of his body.
Yeah, I mean, if you get a sports hernia or something, and you're going over the wall, you're out of it. You're not going to be able to do it.
Well, if you equate it again, if we equate it to another sport, you got a guy who's a lifetime AAA baseball player, and he blows out his knee. Does he have the same advantage to rehab as some guy who's making $40 million a year in the major leagues? I.e., and there's basically where you're talking about a right front tire changer as opposed to a guy who's sitting in a seat.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, a good point. They are a lot more disposable than the drivers.
Okay, so we're not looking for a big weekend necessarily from Stewart-Haas Racing's drivers. We've got about 5 minutes or so to go through fantasy. Let's talk about Kentucky Speedway and and what we should look for down there if we're playing fantasy racing games this weekend, Dan.
Well, you certainly have to acknowledge that Hendrick Motorsports and their affiliated teams have got the dominant hand at the moment. They came within 2 positions and maybe 2 laps of winning their 6th consecutive race. Kevin Harvick dominated big chunks of the road course race at Sonoma. That engine package seems to be just hitting on all cylinders right now. We haven't had an engine problem in a little while. So you go to Group A, you got to look at the usual cast, the usual suspects. Line up Johnson, Gordon, and Harvick and pick from them. And make your choice based on allocation management after that. Harvick doesn't have the same kind of record as Johnson and Gordon do at Kentucky and even in the cookie cutter races this year. But the things that have happened to him have been sometimes out of his control. So he's going to run at the front of the pack. Whether or not he finishes there is going to be dictated by circumstances. So when it comes down to it, I'm going to pick between Gordon and Johnson, and that's probably how I'm going to play the next couple of unrestricted intermediate speedways. You drop down to Group B, and it's time to look at those Penske guys again. They've been the other drivers that are right there at the top of the order every time you come to this track type. So Logano or Keselowski, one or the other, needs to be on your roster. Edwards has done extremely well on the cookie cutter races, cookie cutter tracks so far this year. He has a sweep of the top 15, 2 top 5s, and a 6th place finish. Plus, now he's got the momentum from the Sonoma win that offsets the disappointing run he had at Michigan 2 weeks ago. So I think he's got to fit there in the top 4 or 5 in the Yahoo game. And I'm willing to put Jamie McMurray up there fairly high now. They've done well. Larson's done a little bit better on this track type, it seems, or a little better than expected. Exceeded expectations, but McMurray has not on this track type. But the things that have happened to McMurray have, by and large, been strange occurrences that have been somewhat out of his control. Paul Menard rounds out that top 5 for drivers to pick out of Group B. And I think you can get 2 good drivers out of there. You're going to get some good qualification efforts out of those drivers. So those are the 4 of those drivers should be on your provisional roster. Then wait for practice to decide who you're actually going to start. You jump down to Group C, and it is grim this week. You really only have 2 options, maybe 3. And those 2 options are the same 2 that we've been talking about all year, Austin Dillon, Kyle Larson. Dillon's done a little better. Has scored top points in Yahoo's Group C more often than Larson has on similarly configured mile-and-a-half tracks. But a lot of that's been circumstance, and a lot of the times Larson's been right behind him. So I think there's easily a push between those 2 drivers, and you're going to start. If you're going to start one of them, you're going to start whichever one you have the most allocations remaining for. But you might want to not forget about Danica Patrick. She still has that top 10 finish at Kansas in her back pocket. She had a strong run at Chicago. She had a good run at Michigan a couple of weeks ago.
That's not all she's got in her back pocket, by the way, but go ahead. I couldn't let it go. I'm sorry.
But she also had a strong run at Michigan a couple of weeks ago. So a solid, I think it was top 15 there or somewhere right around the 15th place mark. If she practices well, she could be that driver that you put on your roster. Make your choice between Dillon and Larson before the weekend starts. Maybe Patrick gets that 2nd position on the roster so that if she shows some speed in practice and qualifies well, it might be worth rolling the dice. You're going to have to do it sometime this year. So a one-off track like Kentucky or Atlanta coming up in a little bit is a better place to try to roll the dice sometimes than the tracks where you've got 2 races.
Yeah, I think I kind of like that Danica Patrick call for Kentucky. I saw some things at Michigan. I thought she ran decently. She actually didn't run bad at this past weekend at Sonoma. So maybe she's getting a better overall feel for the car and the team. I think that's part of it. She's actually finished better than a couple of her teammates in most races.
Yeah,
the pickle boat for the Stewart-Haas team. So.
It's been a learning curve, and it continues. It's the way new drivers are supposed to develop. You get a driver like Denny Hamlin in his rookie season, like Kyle Larson in his rookie season, and you think that that's what should be normal. But given the history of NASCAR and given the history of auto racing, that's not what's normal. What's normal is for them to take a year, 2 years, 3 years to develop, and then they get to be really good in their 4th or 5th years. I don't know if Danica's been really good in her 4th or 5th years, but she's certainly not taking longer to develop than she should.
No, I think she's probably doing. Don't you think she's probably doing what she should be doing? She's got better equipment than those guys in those last 10, 12 cars for sure than they do. But she's finishing ahead of those guys in most races, and she's finishing ahead of teammates that have the same equipment in theory, and certainly more of a reputation. I think she's done okay. I personally.
She's not making too many mistakes. Things happen to her. She's not making mistakes at the wheel. Where they seem to be having a problem is perhaps in communication, and not keeping up on the changes of the car, and that's going to be a problem. But that gets back to the problem is in the pits and in the crew more than it is behind in the cockpit, and that's Stuart Haas's problem at the moment.
Yeah, that's almost a team-wide issue, I think. The other thing is she hasn't gotten to the point where she's willing, maybe she's being told not to, where she's taking the chances that you have to take in each race if you're going to have a shot at a top 10 or a win. You know, she's not making that athletic move that a Kyle Larson will make or a Kyle Busch will make, you know, as an example, to differentiate themselves from the rest of the pack. She's not doing that. And I think she's showed enough in IndyCar that she has that in her. But maybe she's being told, you know, just don't make mistakes too much. Maybe she's hearing that in her ear too much.
Maybe, but I think it's also part of her development process. If she was making those mistakes, then she wouldn't be. She might be improving by leaps and bounds, but she wouldn't be improving steadily, consistently.
Right. No, I agree. Okay, so we've come to the part where the show where we have to make our picks. I think I'll go first this week. I'm going to take Kyle Busch. I just like him at Kentucky. I know he hasn't had a consistent season and it hasn't really been very good the last couple of weeks, but I think that's Kyle Busch, and I think this is a week he's going to win again. Beth Ann, who you got?
I'm going to take Brad Keselowski.
Brad Keselowski going with one of the forwards. Kind of like that pick. How about you, Steve-O? What do you got?
Well, I'm going to look for back-to-back Jack Roush smiles with the Biff.
Greg Biffle. I'm surprised Beth didn't take Biffle after her pace car ride with the Biff at Michigan Speedway.
I took him at MIS.
Oh, you took him at MIS. That's right. Yeah, that's true. Okay. Dan, it's up to you. You've got the cleanup spot. Who are you taking at Kansas, at Kentucky?
Close enough. One of those Midwestern K-states.
Right.
Kentucky can be considered Midwestern. I'm going with Joe Lowe from the block.
Really?
Logano.
Joe Lowe from the block. Wow.
So we got both the Penske drivers picked a Toyota and another three Fords, and I got 3 Fords and a Toyota. I mean, the Chevys have been winning everything in this freaking sport for 15 races, and nobody on this expert panel takes a Chevy. That's brilliant, guys.
Well, watch how you spell expert. That's what. That's the problem.
Yeah.
Just drop off the E.
Yeah.
Okay, well, we're going to bring this our weekly live NASCAR Hangout on Pit Road to an end today. I want to thank all my buddies here. Beth Ann, thanks for joining us. I know it's tough for you to get here on Tuesdays, and we enjoy having you and your input. Steve-O, thanks, and Steve and I had a lot of fun Saturday night at Sandusky Speedway. Steve does the call of the race, and I was just kind of his caddy, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. It was a lot of fun. And
you did a great job. You kept abreast of the Tiger game during the race. That's what your job entailed. So
Steve informed on who scored when, and those super modifieds were definitely cool cars to get a chance to see again. I hadn't seen them in a while. Dan, thanks again for all your expert input and work on the magazine. Dan is the the editor of on Pit Row magazine, and I'm kind of his caddy there too. So I get to I'm a caddy. I'm going back to my childhood. I was a caddy when I was young. I get to do that again. So anyway, follow everybody on Twitter. Steve is at Bench Racing. Dan is at Fantasy Race. I am at On Pit Row. Beth Ann is at My Metro Toledo. And join us next week here on our live NASCAR Hangout on Pit Row. We'll see you then.
You've just been on Pit Row, and now you're up to speed with the best information about the world of NASCAR. Come back next week and join the pit crew, Steve and Charlie, and go on Pit Row. On Pit Row is a presentation of Bench Racing Productions.
Hey, this is Jeff Hammond from NASCAR on Fox and Speed, and all the cool people hang on Pit Row.
This is On Pit Row. On Pit Row.